let's start. First of all, we're going to take an excerpt from the Torah portion, and today in particular, the Torah portion of Shemot, which is the beginning of the book of Exodus. So we're talking about the fact that the Jewish people are now starting the whole story of them. This whole book, the second book of Torah, is about Exodus. And this is the beginning of all the stories that happened that led up to the redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt. The book of Zohar, which is the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, as well as some of his students. It's a collection of all the discussions that they had, all the learning that went on, that was turned into the book of Zohar. And therefore, in the text of the Zohar, you will many times find that it's quoting a discussion of the rabbis. This one said this, that one said that, this one opened up the conversation, and this one answered, and this one came in suddenly at the middle. So the Zohar is the collection of all their learnings, and these are learnings that are more the esoteric part of the Torah, the deeper part of the Torah. There are parts of the Zohar which are like Aggadic commentary on the Torah, gives you another layer of meaning into some verses of the Torah. And there are other parts of the Zohar which will show you how there is an entire second layer of this very same words that you're reading. It also has a secondary lesson. For example, a classic example of that would be where in the Torah talks about the laws of what's called and translated slavery, not slavery as we know it in the United States, but in those days where if somebody didn't have enough money and they would make a contract to sell their services for a number of years and they would be completely now under the control of somebody else, that person has prepaid, pre-bought the services of this person, for example, for an X number of years. That would be one of the scenarios. So there's a lot of laws in there regarding this servant. Comes the Zohar and tells you that besides the simple meaning of these laws, everything that has been written about this idea of a servant is all about the reincarnation of a soul. And we'll walk you through step by step and explain to you with this word, the Torah is referring to the soul. With this sentence is talking about a particular type of soul. With this sentence is telling you how many times the soul could come back down. And it takes it apart, which is of course fascinating and beautiful to be able to understand the godly wisdom of how everything and anything in the world from the beginning of creation till the coming of Mashiach is already hidden and written in the Zohar. So today, in today's text, which you have in front of you, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son are sitting down and learning. And at a certain point, his son asked Rabbi Shimon, well, what is the reason why the Jewish people were sent to exile? You know, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were all living in the land of Canaan in those days, which in the future was supposed to become Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. And suddenly God decides to ship them off to Egypt. Why did they have to be shipped off from that land? And why Egypt? Why in particular there? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, you know, it's a great question. Are you asking one question? Are you asking two questions? So his son answers, well, I'm asking two questions. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, well, your two questions are really one. But since you are so gifted, it seems like you already have the answer. So why don't you get up and tell us the answer? So he stands up and he starts now giving the answer on a deeper level in the Zohar to these questions that he himself had posed. And that's where we're starting the text today of the Zohar. So let's go to your sheets. And again, if you could follow Hebrew or Aramaic, wonderful. There is some numbering that are in these sheets, but those are just for the sake of identifying when I could tell you which line we're on. There is no significance to why those numbers are exactly there. Okay, so Rabbi Lazar turns around and answers Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and it says, says, well, the secret is like this. Let's start from the beginning. That the world was created with 10 utterances. That God said, let there be light, let there be this, let there be that. So the world was created with those commandments, which on a deeper level, Kabbalah and Zohar also explained the 10 utterances are really the 10 different levels, sefirot, of the supernal world, which we're going to cover at a different time. So it continues that it was created b'chachma b'tuna, with wisdom and understanding. Telata inun, there are 3 levels within that. V'alma b'hu idbari b'dat. And so the whole world was created with these 3, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Ve'alma lo itberi ella beginehon de Israel. And the world was created only for the sake of the Jewish people to be able to fulfill their mission in this world. Kadba lekaima alma. So once the world came into being, that was the purpose. So now the world was created by God. So Avel Avraham berazah de chachma, leYitzchak berazah de tfuna, leYaakov berazah de das. So then God came and revealed Himself and brought forth to Abraham with the power of knowledge from the level of chachma, to his son the level of bina, which means understanding, and his son Yaakov, the grandson of Abraham, with the level of that knowledge. So in other words, 3 different levels of supernal wisdom was shared with these 3 people in this world. Ubedat chadarim yimal'u. So with those knowledge that was partaken, so now the world came to a good, fulfilled level. Ubahi shaita ishtachlal kol alma. And at that time, the entire world became solidified. In other words, the purpose of the world was not partially fulfilled once Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob brought godliness into the world. That was one of the purposes to begin with, why God created the world. So now, this came to a good, solid foundation. Umideit yalidu leYaakov teresa shvatin. And once to Yaakov was born the 12 tribes, the 12 sons, so now each tribe representing one spiritual level, so the 12 spiritual levels that were in the higher realm had found their grounding down in this world. So again, this was another level of solidifying the original purpose of God for creating the world. So at that point, so at that point, God was happy that the world was going according to the plan that He wanted, that He had originally planned. Obviously, God is the all-powerful. He could make the world go any way He wants, but He had created freedom of choice. So at this point, it was enjoyment for God that these people had exercised their freedom of choice to have such a conscious level of godliness. We're talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes. They're going in the right path. So now that the upper world and the lower world were connected so solid, so there was something else that had to come to attention. So Amar, at that point God said, Dilma chas v'shalom it'arun b'shar amamin v'ishtar pegemuta b'chulu almin. Now that these people have become very famous, Abraham was world famous with all the miracles that happened with him, right? He was thrown into fire, remember, and Nimrod wanted to kill him. The whole world knew about Abraham. And then his son, Isaac, and then his son, Jacob. And now the 12 tribes, all following the righteous path. So in that part of the world, which would be currently where the Holy Land is, Israel is, they were world famous. However, in those days, the internet didn't exist yet, so not necessarily other countries didn't know about them. But in their vicinity, everybody knew them by face, by name, and so on. Other people had heard, but they hadn't seen them, and they didn't know exactly who they are. So the worry was that now they became famous, there would be paparazzi, and everybody's going to want to come and deal with them. And everybody's going to want to come and mix with them. You know what? Let's go become part of this whole tribe. You know, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, these are celebrities in that part of the world. And so God didn't want that there should be a mix. Wanted the generation of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the children to stay pure, to continue on the same path, not to get mixed in with the rest of the world, with their fads, with their ideas, and everything else. So what did God do? So at that point, so he moved all of them. God took the entire Jewish population at that point, which were a total of 70 people, and he moved them to Egypt. Why? Because there in Egypt, people were corrupt. There was, in those days, that was like, I don't know what's the equivalent these days. You know, I don't want to put down any cities these days in the world. I don't think any cities today were as corrupt as Egypt in those days. So then the people of Egypt actually hated and despised the way of this new tribe that came in. They don't worship idols. They believe in something that you can't see. And they have interesting customs. They have unique clothing. And they have a language of their own. Who's interested in them? Forget about it. We should try to deport them. Of course, they weren't successful because Pharaoh had already given permission, for them to be there. But as a nation, they were despised by the Egyptians. So thereby, this guaranteed that there is absolutely no mixing of the nations. So the Jewish people just stayed completely pure. As a matter of fact, the one incident that happened, that there was one child born out of an Egyptian, is recorded in the Torah to tell you that was the only incident that ever happened in all of those centuries that the Jewish people were there. There was only one child that was born from an Egyptian, one Jewish child born from an Egyptian. Everybody else just kept to their own, and the family just married between the tribes themselves. What was your question?
When was that? When did they come to Egypt?
When did they come to Egypt? So we're talking about, the Torah was given about 3,300 and, 35 years ago? I may be off of it there a little bit. And they were, before that, 40 years, so that was in the beginning of being in the desert, and before that they were in Egypt for 210 years. So that would be 3,500 and some years, 500 and let's say 50 years roughly. 3,550 years ago is when they went to Egypt, and they were there for 210 years. So that was the outcome, where the mission was accomplished, where now the Jewish people were left alone to be on their own. As a matter of fact, by the time that the time of redemption had come, the 210 years were over, as we're going to learn in the upcoming Torah portions. It says that some of the merits that the Jewish people had for being redeemed was because they didn't change their language, they didn't change their names. They didn't suddenly become John and Peter and so on and so forth. They were still Shmuley and Yankel and Moshe and Cheskel and so on and so forth. And their clothing. So when they were walking in the street, everybody could right away say, there goes a Jew. Look at him. Look at the way they dressed. They kept everything very unique. Pretty much like, in Brooklyn these days, right? If you walk around, you could pick, there's another Hasidic Jew, he's walking around, very unique clothing, and you could pick him from the crowd. So that was the greatness of what was accomplished by the Jewish people going down to Egypt. So now remember, this is all part of the answer that Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is giving to his father. So meanwhile, he continues, people hated the Jewish people. They didn't want to have anything to do with them. Even if the Jewish people wanted, the Egyptians didn't want to have anything to do with them. And therefore, there was no mixing of the two nations. So all the children, all the offsprings of the Jewish people were just purely from Jewish people. Meanwhile, so the sin of the other nations that were meanwhile occupying the land of Canaan at that time came to its height, because even though Abraham was promised that he's going to get the land, God had told him, but now is not the time, because the nations that are still living in this land, their sin hasn't reached the height that would justify them being kicked out and taking the land away from them. The time will come and I will then turn around and give you that land. So by the time the Jewish people spent those years in Egypt, the 7 nations that were in the land of Canaan had already reached the lowest level of decadence. And now God said, I no longer want them on this holy land. It's time for the Jewish people, the descendant of Abraham, that I had promised him the land, come and take the land. So at that point is when the Jewish people had the merit because of the purity, and they were ready to come and take over the land. So now, after Rabbi Elazar said this, came Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So also Rabbi Shimon got up and kissed the head of his son Elazar. And he told him to his son, rise, my son, stand up, because your mazel now is shining. In the heavens above, it's a time when things are much easier revealed to you than other times. You have already started with this, so you showed that the gates of heaven are open for you. So therefore, continue. Now that you're on a roll, and God is opening the gates of heaven for your levels of understanding, for your wisdom, continue teaching. Yosef Rabbi Shimon, so Rabbi Shimon, the father, went ahead and sat down. But Rabbi Elazar Berei Kaim, and his son Rabbi Elazar got up, and he explained Mili de Razi de Chachmasa, other words of wisdom. V'havo anpoin nehirin kashimsha, his face was radiating like the sun. Umilin mispadrin v'tosid berikia, and whatever he was saying, the words had a spiritual power that were just flying to the higher realms of the world. Yasvu terein yomin. Wow, now interesting to. It's where on the Hebrew pages is where it says number 5, just for the sake of reference, if you want to follow. So as they sat down now to continue this discussion, they sat down for 2 days, for 48 hours. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son sat down to now learn everything that pearls of wisdom of Kabbalah and mysticism that was being revealed to them. And while they were doing this, they had no idea what was day, what was night. They were just sitting straight for 48 hours. Kad Nafku, so once they finished learning the topic, Yadu Dahavet Yomin de la Talmudi. So they suddenly realized that 48 hours, 2 days have passed, where they haven't even eaten anything. They were just sitting and learning straight and non-stop. Kara al Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon said about this, once they realized this, he said, Vayhi shamim Hashem arbaim yom v'arbaim laila. About Moses, it says that when he went to receive the Torah, he was on Mount Sinai for how long to receive the Torah? 40 days and 40 nights. Moses was up there in the mountain, just speaking to God and receiving the Torah. And it says in the verse, Lechem lo ochal, he didn't eat bread, he didn't drink, nothing, for 40 days and nights straight. So Rabbi Shimon said, look at us. Look, what if we're not even on the level of Moses? And here we're just sitting and learning Torah, secrets of Torah, of course, Kabbalah, but nonetheless, for 48 hours, we completely were not realizing anything of the physical world. Sleep, physical needs, eating, nothing. So how much more so Moshe Dikra Asid Bey? So how much more so Moses? Now you could understand, he told his son, where the Torah gives a testimony about Moses of his level and who he was. Vayisham im Hashem arba'im yevim, and he was 40 days and 40 nights with God. We weren't with God now. We were just learning secrets of the Torah. But imagine Moses was with God for 40 days and 40 nights. So now we understand alachas v'kama kat also Rabbi Chia kamei the Rabbi. So we understand how that was possible for Moses to be completely above physical world and physical needs, because when you read the Torah, you wonder to yourself, how did Moses do? What does that mean? 40 days and 40 nights, no eating, no sleeping, no drinking, no nothing, right? And then at the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, he comes back down with the Torah, then he breaks the tablets. Then the next day he goes up again for 40 days and 40 nights to ask for forgiveness from God about what the Jewish people did, and then come back to tell them that they are forgiven. So it's inhuman what's going on there. But based on this experience that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son had, he says, okay, you know what? We now understand it. So all of this was being taught, and one of the students of Rabbi Shimon was there when they were learning these things. His name was Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia came to Rabbi, when Rabbi Chia came in front of Rabbi, and told him about this whole story. So Zohar Rabbi, so Rabbi said, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, so he told him, listen, you want to know something? Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Arya Rabbi Elazar Berei Arya. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is like a lion when it comes to the secrets of Torah, and his son Elazar is like a lion when it comes to the secrets of the Torah, of how deep they could learn. So in other words, what are you so amazed about? They are at a completely different level than most scholars, these two. V'lav Rabbi Shimon kishar Aryavasa, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is not like the rest of the lions. He's a head and shoulder above. Aleksiv Arya Shog Milo Yirakum. There is verses about him that describe his level being different than all others. All the worlds above shake from when Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai speaks or teaches. The heavenly courts all start shaking from his spiritual power. Anon al achas kama v'chama. So how much more so we should be have fear out of respect for Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Now here he gives a description. Gavra de Lagoza Tanisa Almin. He's someone, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who never established that there should be a fast day, because in the olden days, whenever they needed something, the custom used to be, for example, it didn't rain for a long time, let's say in the Holy Land, so the sages would get together and one of the leaders of the generation would say, okay, we're going to establish a fast. Everyone has to fast so that God sends rain. And people would fast and they would pray and they would purify themselves so that God should change things and bring. So here he says, you have to know, that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai never established any fasts during his time. And nonetheless, Almad Shoel Ubae, nonetheless, whatever he prayed for, even though he never established the fast, God granted. So come and learn the fact that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai would give a decree, Vekucha biruchu mekayim, and God would fulfill His decree. What an amazing level that somebody could have spiritually, that he would give a decree and God would follow and say, okay, he said that's the way it's going to be, or she said that's the way it's going to be, then I'm going to change things to be that way. Not only that, kucha birichu gozer, God makes a decree, ve'ihu mevatel, and he has the capability to nullify what God wants. The way God wanted something to happen, he and people like him of his caliber could intercede and change that by saying, this is not how it should be.
Who wrote that?
This is the Zohar. So this was the conversation between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the son of this rabbi that came and was reporting the learning that went on between Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son Elazar.
And who's saying that Rabbi Shimon can intervene like that? Is Rabbi Shimon saying it? Or
No. This is, they both have the same first name. It's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel,
Yes.
who is a different person than Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai.
Okay.
So he's saying it about Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai.
Gotcha.
He's telling his son, what are you in such an amazement for? You seem to be almost flipped by the power that he has. This is nothing. He's a special level that not too many people have. This is what says in the pasuk about the fact that Moshe ba'adam, that God is the one that rules on a person. Tzadik Moshe yiras Elokim, and a righteous person is the one that could control actually what God is about to do. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe ba'adam, Moshe ba'Hakadosh Baruch Hu tzadik de'ugozer u'gezeru v'tzadik mevatla. So this is part of it that he's explaining as far as the level of a tzaddik, a righteous person. And so in Chassidus, it teaches us how is this possible? Why is it that somebody, a human being born of flesh and blood, could actually have such a power, so to say, to change things, not only to establish something. It's one thing to say a tzaddik, a righteous person, wants something. So let's say you come and you say to a righteous person, I would like to XYZ, whatever it is that you need. And the person says, okay, you know what? God should give it to you. Okay. So God says, 1 second, this righteous person says this should happen. Okay, I'll make it happen. But furthermore, what we learn here is not only that. Even if there was a decree, let's say it's already written in the destiny of a person that this person cannot have X, Y, and Z. And you come to the tzaddik, to the righteous person, and say, can I please, give me a blessing, guide me or something, I would like to have X, Y, and Z. And the tzaddik says, okay, God willing, I'll pray for you, and you should have blessings, and you should try also to do your mitzvahs, and so on and so forth. And so even though in the heavens above it was written that this person cannot have X, Y, and Z, a tzaddik, a righteous person, could change that decree. And say, God, I want this to go in a different direction. And God would fulfill that as well. And why is that? So the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, because a tzaddik of that level, once he has so much control in the physical realm, and when I say control, meaning control of himself, of his life, of his thought process, of his emotions, of his level of spirituality, where he is in the driver's seat. He doesn't get carried away by the nonsense of the world. He's spending all his time doing what needs to happen, and so on and so forth. So a person can reach such a level once the physical world, he lives in a way that the physical world has no effect on him, the way he lives, he stays on the course. So God automatically removes the physical obstacles from this person. And not only that, when they reach a very high level, God gives them the 3 keys that it says not everybody usually gets them. It says in the Talmud that there's 3 keys that God has to give, and not everybody could get it all at the same time. What are those 3 keys? One is children, one is money, right? So, and then the third one is techias hamesim, and bringing back the dead. So these 3, as we know, there have been prophets that have had that capability as well. So nonetheless, even though nobody could have all 3 keys, but there are certain tzaddikim, righteous people, that could reach such a level where God gives them all those keys. Why? Because they have already elevated everything in the physical world which relates to them. So they have refined themselves to such a high level. Souls of that caliber could affect this world and could help people even after they have passed away physically. Because even though after somebody passes away, we say that gradually the soul loses its connection and retains only a minimal amount to the gravesite after 12 months, which is the channel, the opening of where, that's why we go to the gravesite sometimes to visit people, right? Because the soul of that person still has a connection to that spot. However, for tzaddikim, righteous people, after 12 months, their presence in the world doesn't get diminished. Their soul is just as powerful as it was before, and as the Zohar explains, sometimes even more powerful than when they were physically in this world, because now the physical limitations of the soul has been taken away, and the soul has given permission to have a presence in this world to help people and to lead people. So therefore, that is the power of tzaddikim, righteous people of the high caliber, and that's what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was telling here the student about Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. What's the lesson here that we learn besides the general knowledge? The fact that throughout ages, throughout the thousands of years of godliness and Judaism that we have experienced, there has always been those special souls and those leaders of generation. So first it was Abraham, then it was in the next generation Isaac, then it was Jacob, then we had the 12 tribes, and then as time went on, then there was Moses. After Moses was Joshua. After Joshua came the period of the judges. 8 generation had 1 judge. Then came the period of the prophets. Each generation had a prophet, and so on and so forth. And even after that, after the Jewish people got scattered throughout exile, in every generation there has always been at least 1, if not more, righteous people of very high caliber, spiritual caliber, that had the leadership of the Jewish people. Which is the reason why we have had the custom of, if possible, seeking these righteous people, going to them or writing to them, requesting blessings, discussing our problems, our life problems with them, and seek their advice. And sometimes it would be practical advice, do this, don't do that. And sometimes it would be, I hear you, I will pray for you. And sometimes it would be, well, I will pray for you, I'll give you blessings, but I also need you spiritually to do X, Y, Z. Why? Because they have the capability of seeing in the spiritual world what is wrong, what needs shaking up, what needs to change here to change the direction of this person's life. And that is the reason why, as you have seen, we have the custom of going to the gravesite of holy people, right? If you ever go to Israel, everybody goes to visit this great tzaddik, that great righteous person. We go to their gravesites, we pray to God. Why do we do it there? Because A, we know that the souls still retain a connection to the body that was buried there. Not that they are trapped in the grave, but the soul in the heavens above has this basically a communication line. And we ask Hashem to please, in the merit of this tzaddik, righteous person, to help us. But not only that, we're also hoping that this righteous person will be an advocate for us in the heavens above. So in the United States, where we don't have as many, people of that caliber buried, for example, one of the more famous one is the Lubavitcher Rebbe's gravesite, the Ohel, in New York. That's why many people flock there and go there to at all times of day and night to pray and to put their requests, sometimes on paper, and they read it, they put it on the graveside, in order to be able to, for the holy person to intercede on their behalf. So the makeup of the soul is something that we need to understand. The spiritual vitality of the soul, where it comes from a level of spirituality, which we're learning Thursday nights in our Tanya class, and we're going to dig into it more. We're going to learn more about the soul. But now what we have also learned is that the soul, not only all souls, also after a person passes away, still exist in the spiritual realm, but there are some souls that actually retain a very strong connection down to this world and to the people in this world.